Chapter 2 of Rupert of Hentzau. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Recording by Andy Minter. Rupert of Hentzau, taken from the Memoirs of Fritz von Tarlenheim, by Anthony Hope. Chapter 2. A Station Without a Cab. The arrangements for my meeting with Mr. Rassendyll had been carefully made by correspondence before he left England. He was to be at the Golden Lion Hotel at 11 o'clock on the night of the 15th of October. I reckoned to arrive in the town between 8 and 9 on the same evening, to proceed to another hotel, and on pretence of taking a stroll, slip out and call on him at the appointed hour. I should then fulfil my commission, take his answer, and enjoy the rare pleasure of a long talk with him. Early the next morning he would have left Wintenberg, and I should be on my way back to Strelsau. I knew that he would not fail to keep his appointment, and I was perfectly confident of being able to carry out the programme punctually. I had, however, taken the precaution of obtaining a week's leave of absence, in case any unforeseen accident should delay my return. Conscious of having done all I could to guard against misunderstanding or mishap, I got into the train in a tolerably peaceful frame of mind. The box was in my inner pocket, the letter in a porte-monnaie. I could feel them both with my hand. I was not in uniform, but I took my revolver. Although I had no reason to anticipate any difficulties, I did not forget that what I carried must be protected at all hazards and all costs. The weary night journey wore itself away. Bauer came to me in the morning, performed his small services, repacked my handbag, procured me some coffee, and left me. It was then about 8 o'clock. We had arrived at a station of some importance, and were not to stop again till midday. I saw Bauer enter the second-class compartment in which he was travelling, and settled down in my own coupé. I think it was at this moment that the thought of Rischenheim came again into my head, and I found myself wondering why he clung to the hopeless idea of compassing Rupert's return, and what business had taken him from Strelsau. But I made little of the matter, and, drowsy from a broken night's rest, soon fell into a doze. I was alone in the carriage, and could sleep without fear or danger. I was awakened by our noontide halt. Here I saw Bauer again. After taking a basin of soup, I went to the telegraph bureau to send a message to my wife. The receipt of it would not merely set her mind at ease, but would also ensure word of my safe progress reaching the Queen. As I entered the bureau, I met Bauer coming out of it. He seemed rather startled at our encounter, but told me, readily enough, that he had been telegraphing for rooms at Wintenberg. A very needless precaution, since there was no danger of the hotel being full. In fact, I was annoyed, as I had especially wished to avoid calling attention to my arrival. However, the mischief was done, and to rebuke my servant might have aggravated it by setting his wits at work to find out my motive for secrecy. So I said nothing, but passed by him with a nod. When the whole circumstances came to light, I had reason to suppose that, besides his message to the innkeeper, Bauer had sent one of a character and to a quarter unsuspected by me. We stopped once again before reaching Wintenberg. I put my head out of the window to look about me, and saw Bauer standing near the luggage van. He ran to me eagerly, asking whether I required anything. I told him nothing, but instead of going away, he began to talk to me. Growing weary of him, I returned to my seat and waited impatiently for the train to go on. There was a further delay of 5 minutes, and then we started. "Thank goodness!" I exclaimed, leaning back comfortably in my seat and taking a cigar from my case. But in a moment the cigar rolled unheeded on to the floor, as I sprang eagerly to my feet and darted to the window, for just as we were clearing the station, I saw, being carried past the carriage on the shoulders of a porter, a bag which looked very much like mine. Bauer had been in charge of my bag, and it had been put in the van under his direction. It seemed unlikely that it should have been taken out now by any mistake. Yet the bag I saw was very like the bag I owned. But I was not sure, and could have done nothing had I been sure. We were not to stop again before Wintenberg, and with my luggage or without it, I myself must be in the town that evening. We arrived punctual to our appointed time. I sat in the carriage a moment or two, expecting Bauer to open the door and relieve me of my small baggage. He did not come, so I got out. It seemed that I had few fellow passengers, and these were quickly disappearing, on foot or in carriages and carts that waited outside the station. I stood looking for my servant and my luggage. The evening was mild. I was encumbered with my handbag and a heavy fur coat. There were no signs either of Bauer or of baggage. I stayed where I was for 5 or 6 minutes. The guard of the train had disappeared, but presently I observed the station master. He seemed to be taking a last glance round the premises. Going up to him, I asked whether he had seen my servant. He could give me no news of him. I had no luggage ticket, for mine had been in Bauer's hands, but I prevailed on him to allow me to look at the baggage which had arrived. My property was not among it. The station master was inclined, I think, to be a little sceptical as to the existence of both bag and of servant. His only suggestion was that the man must have been left behind accidentally. I pointed out that in this case he would not have had the bag with him, but it would have come on in the train. The station master admitted the force of my argument. He shrugged his shoulders and spread his hands out. He was evidently at the end of his resources. Now, for the first time, and with sudden force, a doubt of Bauer's fidelity thrust itself into my mind. I remembered how little I knew of the fellow, and how great my charge was. 3 rapid movements of my hand assured me that letter, box, and revolver were in their respective places. If Bauer had gone hunting in the bag, he had drawn a blank. The station master noticed nothing. He was staring at the dim gas lamp that hung from the roof. I turned to him. "Well, tell him when he comes," I began. "He won't come tonight now," interrupted the station master, none too politely. "No other train arrives tonight." "Tell him when he does come to follow me at once to the Wintenberger Hof. I'm going there immediately." For time was short, and I did not wish to keep Mr. Rassendyll waiting. Besides, in my newborn nervousness, I was anxious to accomplish my errand as soon as might be. What had become of Bauer? The thought returned, and now with it another that seemed to connect itself in some subtle way with my present position. Why and whither had the Count of Luzau Rischenheim set out from Strelsau a day before I started on my journey to Wintenberg? "If he comes, I'll tell him," said the station master, and as he spoke he looked round the yard. There was not a cab to be seen. I knew that the station lay on the extreme outskirts of the town, for I had passed through Wintenberg on my wedding journey nearly 3 years before. The trouble involved in walking and the further waste of time put the cap on my irritation. "Why don't you have enough cabs?" I asked angrily. "There are plenty generally, sir," he answered, more civilly, with an apologetic air. "There would be to night but for an accident." Another accident! This expedition of mine seemed doomed to be the sport of chance. "Just before your train arrived," he continued, "a local came in. As a rule, hardly anybody comes by it, but to night a number of men 20 or 25, I should think got out. I collected their tickets myself, and they all came from the first station on the line. Well, that's not so strange, for there's a good beer garden there. But curiously enough, every one of them hired a separate cab and drove off, laughing and shouting to one another as they went. That's how it happens that there were only 1 or 2 cabs left when your train came in, and they were snapped up at once." Taken alone, this occurrence was nothing, but I asked myself whether the conspiracy that had robbed me of my servant had deprived me of a vehicle also. "What sort of men were they?" I asked. "All sorts of men, sir," answered the station master. "But most of them were shabby looking fellows. I wondered where some of them had got the money for their ride." The vague feeling of uneasiness which had already attacked me grew stronger. Although I fought against it, calling myself an old woman and a coward, I must confess to an impulse which almost made me beg the station master's company on my walk. But